be the only taxes, actually. Now that I think about it, there should only be alcohol.
Is your argument? I mean, I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not, but I'm going to ask: Is your argument really get back to work? Like if you're poor, you should have no enjoyment in your life. You should just work until you become successful. Then maybe you can enjoy your life. Is that sincerely your argument?
No, it's the Protestant.
Topic one, which I don't have in front of me. A NBC opinion piece argues for increased taxes on alcohol. The purpose of this tax increase would be to reduce consumption, therefore the social dangers associated with it. It argues, for instance, that women would be a great beneficiary because alcohol fuels domestic violence. How do you feel about crafting public policy to curb the excesses of the average person? If other hard drugs became legal, should we put similar taxes in place? And if you don't agree with taxation, do you have any policy solutions to deal with dangers raised by the article? Yeah. So I thought this was pretty interesting. Like bringing back, I mean, this is like the whole reason we had, what's it called in the 20s? Prohibition. Thank you. Oh God. But yeah, this is the whole argument was because of these excesses, right? And that didn't end up working out for us. But this is a bit of, more of a middle ground. And the article talks about how taxes haven't grown much. Like we do have alcohol taxes, but they just remain flat. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? We'll start with our friend Lactoid.
All right. So there's two principles I want to put forward, which is the first one: my bodily autonomy dictates that I be allowed to put what I want into my own body. I don't care what any of you think. And the second principle is stealing a portion of my money in the form of, quote, taxation is morally wrong and thus unjustified. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to take a look at the pragmatics of taxation. The old saying is that a fine is a tax for doing something bad, and a tax is a fine for doing something good. Both are aimed at discouraging behavior and are indistinguishable in terms of effect. Income tax disincentivizes labor. Sales tax disincentivizes consumption. Gas taxes disincentivize driving, et cetera, et cetera. For these reasons, income taxes are clearly the most evil of all due to the base level immorality compounded with bad economic effects. Sin taxes, on the other hand, like taxes on drugs, porn, or alcohol, discourage behavior that we should all agree are indeed quite bad. We don't want people doing the things that lead to violent crime, unemployment, infidelity, promiscuity, and broken families. But we also don't want to grow the government and steal money. That all being said, I would therefore compromise and be in support of a higher alcohol tax only if it came with a proportional lowering of other taxes, primarily income taxes. Let's all come together, left and right, and encourage work and discourage drinking. Unfortunately, this is not what tends to happen, and usually any increase in taxes merely acts more like if you give a mouse a cookie with government expansion and power. This makes generally any support of alcohol taxes difficult, but you could get me to compromise, but you have to offer something. Lastly, and this is something we should all agree on, we should do a better job at forcing individual irresponsible criminals to pay for their crimes. Violent crimes, including those fueled by alcohol, should be punished more greatly.
I offer you nothing but my scorn, sir. Okay. Next we got Giant Scarlet.
I'm going to echo you, dude, and I'm going to say that while I do believe in increased alcohol taxes, I do also think that more support bipartisanly could come from a promised proportional decrease in other taxes. I appreciate that idea. Now, the main problem that I had with this is that I like it when politicians do their jobs, and apparently the taxes on alcohol haven't been renegotiated in any significant way since 1991. And so some update is available there for them to do their jobs. And I would like that. And that's pretty much it.
All right. I thought you were done. But Corey.
So I'll agree with Lactoid in terms of like bodily autonomy, but at the same time, like I'm pretty sure Lactoid's on the same page. Like nobody should be criminalized for what they consume, but at the same time, totally, tax alcohol for sure, tax super yachts like for sure, tax billionaires for sure.
Lactoid's on the same page, yeah.
Yeah, I know. As a fellow, And as Lactoid knows, as a fellow Canadian, like we as Canadians with public healthcare, we pay a heavy price for, let's say, alcohol consumption. And I disagree with Lactoid in terms of like we should disincentivize driving. I think there are obvious and clear reasons to do that, in that there should be like a greater infrastructure for public transportation. So like, yeah, disincentivizing driving is not inherently a bad thing when going about it in the right way. And I'll just end with that for now.
Okay, interesting. I want to touch on a few of these things you've said just then. Let's go to Aiko.
Okay, I guess I'll start by saying that the first thing I thought of when I saw this topic was all of the different movements to legalize pot, especially in the early days. The argument that was coming from that community was, hey, tax us, like make it legal and tax us so that we can be a resource for the community. Tax us a lot, and we're willing to pay it. And that's what happened. I mean, you're starting to have, especially like Colorado, which is one of the first states, if not the first state, to legalize. Like a lot, they've amended their taxation several times. More and more of that money is like going into the schools and into good places. I think you have an opportunity here to have tax money go into like specifically to refund rehabilitation for people who've become addicted to alcohol. So you can take that money and you can use it to become something that solves for itself. One argument I'm not hearing is that people will stop drinking if this happens, and therefore that was the argument against cigarettes, taxing cigarettes out of existence, was that eventually you would lose all of that money. But of course, that would be a good thing because you don't have the costs that would offset all the money that you're bringing in. So I think this is a little bit of nudge theory, where you're not banning something outright like we did in the 20s, but we're trying to manipulate behavior a little bit. And either we'll have a lot of money for rehab or we'll have reduced consumption. But either way, it's a win.
Thanks so much. Amanda.
Yeah, I hate to just help continue on the echo train, but shout out to taxes on this case. I, especially as a Canadian, am a huge fan of the impact that taxation has on some of these kind of social ills. It's very common in this country to have taxation on alcohol. So this seems very normal. And I think it is really good because when you're looking at, what is the revenue stream that you get from taxation, it provides a lot of opportunities to put funding into some of the social services that help protect against some of these ills. So in the case of alcohol, it helps with like programs to offset alcoholism and other dangers that like happen as a result of excessive drinking. So I think that not only does it help sort of curb actual human behavior, but it takes that revenue stream and puts it into something productive. I won't say, just to play devil's advocate, I think maybe we'll keep some income taxation streams just to mess with you guys. But overall, shout out to taxes and drinking, and especially in the case of other things like pot, like it's proven to be very, very successful. So no hate towards taxes and drinking. Keep it on there.
I'm glad we're all getting along here.
Yeah, so nice. Everyone's so nice.
Reservoir.
Yeah, I oppose higher taxes on alcohol because I know that after watching higher taxes be levied upon cigarettes over the last several decades, and that money itself that those taxes are levied upon state by state, not much of it has gone to actually helping people with problems there. I think that, yeah, we should probably legalize drugs. And I think that realistically, the best thing we could do is to put that money that, whatever the sin tax is, to go ahead and pay for whatever ill that drug causes to our society, right? So let's say a heroin user, we make heroin legal, you just buy heroin, right? Which I think we should do. That money that we tax them should also be there so that way we make sure that they don't die, that they can get off of heroin when they need it. And that's how we should compose these taxes. However, I realize living in the great state of Pennsylvania and watching how cigarette taxes have gone up dramatically, it hasn't been used to go ahead and fund ways for people to get off of smoking. It has instead been used to fund other projects within the state. So in this narrow line, though I do like the idea of this, I don't think that there is a place in America where this has occurred, and I would like to argue that American thing. I don't want to talk to like functional countries with functional governments like Canada for this because they know how taxes work. Here, we just use it to buy more tanks and bombs.
Spartacus, please.
I think you might be muted again.
Oh no.
Pro streamer. All right. I am against the taxation, the extra taxation of alcohol. I don't think it's going to affect the general population in the way people believe. Alcoholics already go to extreme lengths to get their alcohol, to the point to where they're going broke because they're buying alcohol. This isn't going to fix the problem with alcoholics. As a matter of fact, it's just going to make them go broke easier. I don't see any relevance as to how this would essentially help that. I've seen a lot. Although I have seen a lot of alcohol causes this and alcohol causes that and alcohol causes this. And so like the taxation is not going to fix it. So the taxation is just going to make it easier for them to go broke, and it's going to cause a more of a class division when you're talking about people who have alcohol problems. They're going to go towards the lower class because they are spending more money. So I don't see how this would be effective in any way, shape, or form. And in order to apply a taxation to the entirety of the country, I would need to see some sort of effectiveness, and know where this money is going. There's neither of that, and so with that being said, I'm against this. And I think that it's only proper that when we're talking about this, I open a beer at the end of this. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. And finally, Doobie.
Okay. So I'm a little bit sick, so I apologize if I sound a little nasally or more nasally than usual. But I think that first and foremost, we got to like kind of really drill down to like what we're actually talking about, right? It's not just about taxes or about sin, quote unquote. I think that the government has a responsibility to protect the health and well-being of its citizens. I think that they have definitely used tax policy in the past, and I think they should continue using tax policy to discourage certain behaviors that have negative consequences on the public, like excessive alcohol consumption, use of tobacco, etc. I think that through this, the government can reduce the burden of those behaviors on society. I think that one like really useful thing that governments do, right, when they increase the price of like a sin good, like alcohol or weed or cigarettes, is it makes the public aware of like the negative externalities that are associated with the thing that they're buying. So if you buy a pack of like a beer, like a 6-pack, yeah, it's not just the cost of that beer, right? That's being imposed on society or imposed upon you as an individual. There are lots of negative consequences from alcohol use that you're not going to feel as the individual, right? Just the fact that alcohol is available for you to buy, it's available for other people to buy, and some of those people are going to get into drunk driving accidents. It's going to cause them health problems. It's going to lead to domestic violence, lead to them not showing up at work, lead to them not showing up at school, lead to them developing all sorts of fucked up diseases. And all of that is felt not by you as the individual who can drink alcohol responsibly. It's felt by the society that is providing the alcohol or allowing this alcohol to be provided to the public. So I think that when you're looking at this problem, you need to look much like further than yourself. You can say, hey, I can pop open a beer right now and not do any of this stupid shit. But you're not most people, right? There are lots of people out there who are going to do those dumb things. And that cost is going to be felt by the country that you're in. And I think you have a responsibility to that country just as it has a responsibility to you. So, yeah, I think that we absolutely should raise the taxes on cigarettes, alcohol. I don't think that drugs should be legal, but if we're going to make them legal, they should be taxed up the fucking ass. I think that these things should be luxuries for the wealthy. And if the wealthy want to make the stupid decision to get high and get drunk all the time, then hey, let them pay for it. Let them fund our shit.
Okay, open to the panel.
So no,
well,
I'm
go ahead, Spartacus.
I'm gonna stop right there because like the entire idea that, I mean, I agree with you that the government has the responsibility for the welfare of its citizens, but the alcohol tax is not going to be how it's done. the alcohol tax is just going to cause further class warfare, and it's going to bring about the entire idea of classism. And that's also why I'm for the NFA being repealed, is because of classism. We're pushing this idea of classism to where there will be what is actual class warfare. Right now we are seeing classist divides. We are seeing all these types of things, and this is just going to further it. What you do if you want to cause drunk driving to go down, if you want to cause drunk violence to go down, is we make the penalties for these things worse. And that also could include, when I say worse, it could include maybe not a jail sentence, but maybe institutionalized, right? So you get institutionalized and they try and help you out with your issue. So we either move away from the justice system that we currently have and move towards a more of a reparative justice system, or we make the sentences worse and longer to further like discourage people from doing these actions.
So
You're not
basically, are you
discouraging
saying
people. You're not
Sorry.
discouraging people when you enact bigger, when you increase the funding for people to get away from alcohol. You're not necessarily discouraging them. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think that
When you make
first
people
of
Go ahead.
all, when you say that this is not something that's going to affect people's behavior, in the article that we were provided, it provided a link to a study that said that this is not a commodity that is exempt from people not buying it when it's less readily available. So do you have anything to say about that statistic? Because that was one of your claims.
So go ahead. This is not a commodity that's exempt from people buying it when it's less available.
People not buying it when it's less available.
If it's
That's
more
my entire
expensive,
point.
if it's more expensive, people are going to be buying it less. That's the argument.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they'll be
Oh,
making
okay.
it, and they'll just be making it more.
All right,
Right?
there's
It
a study
doesn't
for
like
that. I
again,
just
if we
dropped it.
look at like the history of like prohibition, you would just get a block of like leftover grapes and shit, put it in a water still, and like, you know, that was what you would do. That's how people made alcohol, right? They're still gonna have access to it. So like, and
Wait,
that's
if
the
the
thing.
suggestion is that if you were to make alcohol far more expensive, a small minority of people might make illegal alcohol in their bathtubs, sure. Okay, that might happen. And some of those people might go blind and die from that. But I
Yeah.
feel like you're still overall, the result is going to be far fewer people drinking alcohol.
I mean, I think it causes a higher damage to society
Maybe
when that happens.
the
That's what we
responsible-
saw during prohibition.
The responsible people are going to stop drinking alcohol. Yes, the responsible people who are responsible with their money are going to stop drinking alcohol. This isn't going to stop the alcoholics that are already going broke buying their alcohol. This isn't going to stop them
Right.
from doing anything.
But it will, though.
Then they're
So you're-
wait one second. These are the people getting the DUIs. These are the people that are becoming domestically violent. These are the people that are having the issues, not the responsible drinkers. The responsible drinkers take the biggest hit with a tax hike like this. The responsible drinkers that are law abiding are taking the biggest hit because not only were they not the ones causing the problem, but now they're the ones that are most hurt by this because now they're forced to stop using a commodity that they enjoyed and were responsible with. Whereas the person who's irresponsible with it is also, coincidentally, irresponsible with money and going to go broke continuing to buy the booze.
Okay, but
I think
how do
they're-
you expect that those irresponsible people are now going to respond to increases in penalties for drunk driving? I mean, if this is a group of irresponsible people who won't change their behavior, even when the stakes, even when the stakes are immediate, because we're talking about like paying that quarter now or whatever, how are you going to expect them to respond to incentives that are hypothetical and in the future, which is what these DUI penalties are for? Does anyone get behind their wheel, for instance, and say, "Oh, if it's 6 months in jail, I can handle it, but if it's 2 years in jail, I can't"? So
You're right. It would be slower.
There's some people.
I don't disagree. It would be slower, but it would be more effective in the long run.
Let's go to
But
Corey.
how? Like,
Oh,
wouldn't they just
Corey
be
and Juby
punished after
afterwards.
the
Go ahead.
fact? Okay, good.
No, you can answer that question.
Yeah,
Scott,
go
I
ahead.
Yeah,
guess.
I just wanted to say, wouldn't that just if this is just about punishment after the fact, as opposed to prevention, which is what this is about? Like, I don't understand how the irresponsible crowd are going to respond to these after the fact punishments that really can't change their behavior because it's already happened.
Well, I mean, it can change their behavior because something I brought up was going more towards a reparative justice system to where they would be institutionalized and would work on the issues that were causing them to do that in the first place. And so it would be repairing what they came in there with. And of course, that would be much preferred versus taxing and causing the responsible person to have to either cease or try to minimize their alcohol use or a commodity that they enjoy to try and to get the other people to not spend their money on it, even though they would still. Like the idea that they're just going to stop is insane.
These reparative programs cost money, though, right? They have to be funded by taxes. Something has to be taxed.
Yes.
So
okay, so no. We've seen this, but we've seen this over and over again. Something doesn't have to be taxed. The United States has found multiple ways to steal taxes from other pots of gold and to use it towards this. So I'm sure they can find a pot of gold that has enough gold in it to move towards a reparative justice
system.
There's
enough rainbows in the U.S. that eventually the pot.
Let's go to Corey.
The United States does this all the time.
Corey, Doobie, and Lectoid.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple things that I want to address. Well, yeah, I think the point about potentially increasing penalties or the type of system that you're describing, Spartacus, I don't know. I think it's pretty mixed in terms of how much that would disincentivize drinking. But I take your point of there should be more programs, as to what Amanda alluded to earlier, in terms of funding programs so that people can hopefully get off of these substances. And I think the context changes. I guess this is sort of the difference between Canada and the U.S. When talking about responsible drinking in the U.S., I think the window for responsible drinking in Canada is much smaller, given the fact that we have a publicly funded healthcare system. So it's I think that needs to be taken into account. But also I want to address something that Lactoid brought up, if I remember correctly, in their opening statement, where I think so. You brought up syntaxes or this being a syntax. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but it seemed like you were sort of questioning the effectiveness of syntaxes.
No, I was saying that there's likely some effectiveness there.
Okay.
I actually just wholly disagree that first of all, it is our responsibility to be taking care of people who have a drinking problem.
I know it's ridiculous taking care of people.
I know it's crazy, right? and by the way, this guy kind of the callback to one time when I said universal healthcare is kind of the key to tyranny because it allows you to dictate nearly every aspect of somebody's life under the guise of public health. But all I was saying is that I think it is effective whenever you make something more expensive to discourage it, which is why in the spirit of compromise, I was perhaps willing to accept this if you come with me and we lower income taxes together. So people work more. And then drink less.
I can totally imagine a system where alcohol is so heavily taxed that you don't need income tax anymore. I can imagine that system totally.
The Protestant.
Well, I mean, if we take a look at it though, the people who are using this irresponsibly, and we can even look to other things. The drug users that are using drugs irresponsibly are selling everything, foregoing food. They are doing whatever they have to, whether it involves burglary, whether it involves whatever they have to do. To get this money to get their drugs. And so the idea that you make it more expensive is only going to cause them to have to try and do more to try and get this drugs, because that's how addictions work. Your mind says, I need this, right? And so if you're looking at someone who is an alcoholic and they're listen, I need this alcohol, you're talking about multiple things where you're talking about the person going, okay, yeah, it's more expensive, so my brain's no longer going to say, I need this. No, their brain's still going to say they need this, whether or not it's more expensive or not. The only thing you're adjusting is how much money this person needs to be able to get the product that he wants.
Okay,
it's an addiction issue, not a price issue.
So I don't think anybody who's advocating for an increase in alcohol taxes is for a system where it's people are now committing crimes or they're going through alcohol withdrawal, which is a potentially deadly outcome. Where if you're going through severe alcohol withdrawal and you don't have access to alcohol, I don't think I advocate for increased tax on alcohol, but I also don't want your outcome of someone going through withdrawal and suffering through addiction. I don't think these are mutually exclusive, or rather, I think you can have both an increase on taxes on alcohol and also treat the problem of people going through withdrawal.
Yeah.
So then why, if we're treating the problem,
increase, some sort of gradual increase wherein you're not affecting the lives of the people that you were talking about, the lower income people who maybe just want to enjoy alcohol and they're responsible, a very gradual increase wherein they wouldn't be affected, but also it would keep some people from drinking quite so much, and something good coming out of those taxes wherein you can also help those people out. Like, I just don't see the contradiction here, frankly.
Let's go to
Well, just to
Doobie, and
clarify-
then let's go to Doobie, and then Lactoid. Yeah, and I go.
So I think it's interesting earlier that you mentioned this like being this being like classism or whatever, right? If we were to like increase the price of alcohol, but I feel like that's already happening in a way. I think that, but the classes that we're dealing with aren't just like poor people who are definitely more at risk of alcohol abuse and like negative consequences associated with it, due to like stress, lack of access to healthcare, socioeconomic disadvantages that they might have, but also the high crime in their communities, right? In a lot of these poor communities where we know that like, I think it's up to like 27% of property crime and like almost 40% of violent crime in the United States is like associated with alcohol use, right? So I feel like the people in these neighborhoods are already the most vulnerable to this kind of thing. And if we know that raising the price of this is going to lead to less use in these communities that are the most vulnerable to its negative consequences, it seems like you're in favor of continuing the class warfare by not pulling it out of these communities. And it's true to say, hey, maybe they want to drink this, right? And hey, if I were broke and just struggling to get by, I might want a $2 beer, right, to make me forget about the world for a while. Sure, I can absolutely believe that. But that doesn't mean it's a healthy thing to do, and it's not something that we should be encouraging as a society.
Okay, but
go ahead,
the idea.
Lactoid, and
Go ahead,
then
Lactoid.
I go.
It's in pretty much the point that I make is almost in direct response to Doobie, because you're going to have some level of just like, obviously when something's more expensive, you're going to have less people doing it, but there's also going to be some large group of people that are still going to be doing it, and it's going to represent a higher financial burden on them to do it. And so, like, I guess maybe you could even work it out to like some kind of math problem. But I mean, would you at least agree, Doobie, that the people who are drinkers, or people who like to drink, or the people who just go to the store every week and buy like one bottle of liquor or something like that, this is going to have a pretty regressive effect, which is that when you increase taxes on this, most of the tax base here is going to be poor people, people without a lot of money, people who are already struggling to afford other things. I mean, wouldn't this also be more money out of their pocket? And isn't that a harm in of itself that we have to factor in here?
Well, yeah, it'll make it more difficult for them to choose to like purchase this product. Sure,
But they're
right?
gonna.
But if this product, yeah, I don't buy that. They're just going to. They're not going to pull money out of their ass and just buy it for like out of nowhere.
Well, they might cut it out somewhere else, right?
If they're already an alcoholic, right, then hey, they're going to be able to purchase less of it. They're going to be able to purchase less of the thing that's killing them, right? So that also seems like a good thing to me. I think that like we keep talking about like responsible alcohol users, right? I think responsible alcohol users are responsible until they're not, until they make the decision while drunk to get in a car, or they make the decision while drunk to walk down that dark alley or whatever the fuck. I think that we just like, we know what the problem is, right? Which is alcohol use is contributing to a lot of crimes in our country: domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, physical assault. All these things are massively linked to alcohol use. So if that's the issue, we know that these communities are most vulnerable to that issue. Well, then why not just pull it away from those communities, right? And if there are some people there who are going to save up the money for a month to buy like a 6-pack, sure, go for it. They're still having less access to it than they did before.
But Doobie, if
Let's-
they're saving
let's
up, though,
talk
they're
about-
not spending that on like other shit. Like let's think about like the responsible poor drinker, the archetype or whatever. You have somebody who doesn't make a lot of money, and every week they buy 2 bottles of wine because they like a glass of wine with their dinner. There's some studies that indicate that's actually kind of good for you. We can, I know that the evidence is kind of like split on that one, but
That's cringe.
Not really.
right. So you have somebody who just wants to have that, right? And they don't drunk drive, they don't go crazy, they're not a violent criminal. I mean, aren't you imparting some level of group responsibility on this person who's not involved in like the dangerous behavior that we're concerned about, and you're specifically making their life harder?
Sure. Like I said earlier, it's true that there are some people who aren't involved in those things and never will be involved in those things who will be affected by this in a negative way. Sure, they're going to have less access to alcohol because other people in their communities are doing bad things with that alcohol. Okay, but like I said, I think that you have as much responsibility to your community as your community has to you, right? So that's if you need to bite the bullet and say, hey, this is a massive problem in my community, so we're going to make it less accessible to people, and that makes it harder for me to get it, and I'm not one of those people doing bad things with it. Well, then you just need to bite the bullet and live with it because the community is more important than you are.
Well, I mean, like, let's also talk about this. I'm not saying it's all sex workers, but there is a link between sex workers, drugs, and alcohol, right? And the addictions of those. And so when you talk about this, I'm just bringing this up as an example. But when you talk about this, right, is that you're gonna see like these sex workers out longer during the night, putting themselves in more dangerous positions, trying to get more money to try and feed the addiction they already have. Right, because now they're forced to put themselves in more dangerous positions for a longer period of time than they were prior, right? And that's not what's being taken into account. Raising a tax doesn't just remove it from the community. Raising a tax just raises the cost that it takes to buy this product. And if it just raises the cost, then they're going to find a way to pay for that cost. If they have an addiction, they're going to find a way to pay for that cost.
So I keep hearing this claim, and I
Yeah,
don't
and
see any.
you linked something that directly counters that.
Absolutely. So, like, this is a study.
What I linked.
Actually, I posted a more exhaustive version of that same study, like one that had been through more peer review, that was finally published. That's in the StreamYard chat. And it shows a 25-cent added tax on alcohol purchases per drink. It results in a 9.2% reduction in consumption and an 11.4% reduction in heavy drinking. So there is an impact. But to address Sprout's other point, yes, I think he's right that there needs to be programs for these people. But if we're talking about the tax, we can't just talk about one side of the tax, which is the fact that it reduces, especially reduces heavy drinking, but also the fact that that money can be funneled into programs that directly address the things that Sprout's talking about. Like if you have those people who are turning more tricks because they need to have more alcohol or something like that, they need to have rehabilitation programs made available to them that are severely underfunded now. And I understand Sprout's point that we can just like move things around and pay for them magically at no cost. But it looks like my StreamYard went down.
I don't think it's just you. I don't know.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Okay.
I've never seen that happen before, but definitely happened just now.
Okay, I'm coming back in.
Okay.
My StreamYard's still up.
It's too.
Okay.
Your point was just too genius. All right. Well, continue.
That's why audio's over Discord, right, Prime?
So I think the alcohol companies, corporations are like, not liking this panel. So anyway, my point is that you need to look both at the effect of the tax itself and the effect of whatever is going to be downstream of the tax, the thing that's being paid for. And sometimes you have like big trade-offs when it comes to these sorts of things. But I think in this case, there's a lot of harmony because there's a lot of opportunity to use to tax the very product that's putting people in need of this rehabilitation, and then using that to fund those rehabilitative programs. And so as the need reduces, the tax revenue will reduce. And as the need increases, the tax revenue will increase. There's some good synergy there.
Let's go to Rez, then John.
Yeah, so I just went ahead and looked up some stuff on this. I think that this whole argument that we're going to use these taxes to go ahead and actually support people who are having problems with addictions is completely bound with no basis whatsoever. We look at federal, I looked up federal cigarette taxes. That stuff goes to CHIP. I think we should fund CHIP. I think kids should have health insurance, right? Because they don't have the ability to pay into the system, right? I think that's a good thing. But I think that there should I think we should fund that through other functions, right? And then we should be funding people getting off of cigarettes. There is no basis that this policy is actually going to go ahead and benefit people who suffer from alcoholism. right? I'm posing it based on that no matter what we do, and at least as America, I don't see us actually having the teeth to go ahead and say, hey, guess what? We're doing this to help alcoholics. That is a side benefit, if anything else. At the very best, it is just a blunt force that is applied as like a browbeat on the poor.
So can we?
So like if we were to.
Sorry, can we just fiat
can
that? Can we just like as a group say, well, let's do the tax under the provision that it go to fund?
I mean, yeah, we can absolutely not live in reality. That's
I don't even think that's I don't even think it's relevant, right? So let's pretend that absolutely none of this money goes to fund these programs, right? Well, why should we still not support the program?
Oh, I honestly think that the reason that we shouldn't is because, again, there's people that are living with this. We're basically putting a punishment on people. You know, there's a lot of people that drink. I don't think that the entire crux of society is falling apart because alcohol is illegal, right? All right. If we make it illegal, people will get it regardless. And like you said, they'll go blind, which is going to put a further burden on society.
Wait, hold on. Like,
You're
so
causing
like
more
realistically,
harm with this by making it so that way it's harder for people to gain access to it, which will then
realistically,
result in
like what percent of people do you think
things.
will resort to like brewing their own alcohol in their fucking bathtub, right? Because they can't get like a beer for $3 at 7-Eleven.
I mean,
Like,
okay,
that
so
seems
if it's like
ridiculous.
$3, I guess this is like the question though, is when do we stop those taxes, right? Because I've seen, at least in my adult life, cigarettes have gone from, I bought them at $5 a pack when I was, 18 and everything like that, and now like I'm paying over 10 and I'm not living in a city or anything like that. The thing is, when we start to go ahead and cut back on people that are paying these taxes to begin with because they're no longer drinking, right? Those taxes that we're going to collect, they're just going to keep raising it because people are going to get comfortable on this. This is echoed throughout the federal government, their taxes.
Yeah, but what's the issue with that? If the goal is to reduce the use of this thing, right? So like, what's the issue with it being like $30 a bottle for like a beer?
Well, then I think that we should just cut to the point and just go for prohibition then, right?
No.
Well, I would support that, but I don't think
I mean,
most
you would
people
support that. Like, but that's what I'm saying is that basically what you're advocating for is prohibition with more steps, right?
Let's go to-
Anybody that's supporting this is supporting prohibition with more steps.
Johnny,
I
back
wanted
to
End up
to
with
ask-
speakeasies.
I wanted to ask Cal, are you, I wanted to make sure that I'm reading this study right. So according to this, the people who paid the most, who had the most net tax increases were white male, age 21 to 50 years, and
Greater
made
than 50,000.
more than 50,000 per year. And so I think that the whole idea that the people who will be most impacted are the people who are poorer is a little bit discredited by this study. I think that, in fact, when I think of people who drink pretty heavily, I think of people who are in labor jobs, who go offshore, people who cannot do other types of drugs because of those types of jobs, and who supplement that with alcohol. And so I don't think that the people who will be the most impacted will be people who absolutely will not be able to afford alcohol after this tax increase.
Yeah,
Like
I agree
that-
with all,
Right,
I agree with all of that. Yeah.
Wait,
I agree with
no.
that. I agree with that. But the people who I guess what you mean by most impacted, right? The people that pay the most, or the people that you're looking at how much they pay versus how much they make. And I don't think the study that referenced the 21 to 50-year-olds making above $50,000 a year. I don't think it referenced how much they paid versus how much they made in that ratio as the most impacted. I think if we looked at that, we would see that significantly change.
It said the net tax increase, the group with the biggest net tax increase was that group. So I would assume that would mean that they did adjust for it.
The net tax increase is just the tax increase, whoever paid the most. So 21 to 50 with greater than or equal to $50,000 a year. Yeah, they may pay the most, but that does not mean they're the highest affected group.
By the
Go
way,
ahead. Go ahead. Lactoid.
Yeah.
I wanted to say two. The first thing is, I was interested because I'm looking at it. It does seem that the more money you make, the more you drink, just in terms of actual like the amount of liquor that you purchase. That's very interesting because that doesn't seem to be the case when it comes to other substance abuse. I think it is true, though, that unfortunately, I mean, or very clearly, I guess, that if you don't make a lot of money, those alcohol purchases make up a much larger share of your budget, right? So in terms of how much spending power you have, way more of that share is being spent on alcohol. So any kind of tax increase, even though you're raising money from primarily wealthy people, you have to remember that wealthy people have more money, obviously, like by definition. And so you're going to be disproportionately hurting poor people regardless. The second thing, I have a question for Rez, and this is, I'm just interested in exploring this a little bit. Before you talked about, you described these alcohol taxes as a punishment, which, I mean, that's interesting. I think I would agree with that word, but is there how would you distinguish this form of taxation from, let's say, other forms of taxation? Is income tax a punishment? Would you agree?
What do you mean? Is income tax a punishment?
So
when you're saying that, like, it's just on the money that you make, you get it taxed, and then you have the beneficiary provided, which are, roads, services, and everything like that, right?
What I'm saying is that you define alcohol taxation as a punishment, right? So the more alcohol you drink, the more you pay in taxes.
Yeah, because there's nothing that goes into you paying taxes on alcohol, right? That's going to benefit people who are suffering from alcohol, whereas income taxes are going to benefit me having roads I can drive on, having a military that nobody will fuck with us, right? So like there is actually a tangible benefit that comes from income tax that I can point to and say, yeah, okay, I get this, right? But when it comes to alcohol taxes, it's not going to benefit people that are struggling from alcohol, right? It's going to go to some other government program, and we've seen this happen over and over again when it comes to like cigarette taxes and levies against stuff like those sorts of sins.
It still doesn't make sense to me, though, because
Okay,
the roads are paid for primarily from wheel taxes and gas taxes.
Okay,
income
sure.
taxes primarily fund things
like
like
schools,
schools,
I think
Medicare and
public schools are
Medicaid.
pretty. I think public schools are
Social
pretty
Security.
based, right? I think that it's a pretty good idea for us to have public schools.
Sure, right? but before we talked about alcohol taxes funding chips, for example, would you not say chips is worth funding?
I think chips is absolutely worth funding, right? I'm talking about cigarettes there, right? When it comes to cigarette taxes on the federal level funds chips, right?
Right. So
I think that it's good, but I think that it would be better for us to get that funding just generally from society, because we all benefit from chips, but people getting taxed on cigarettes, they're not getting a benefit from like that part of the sin. I think sin taxes need to be correspondent with the damage that sin causes society. Right.
My question:
smoking causes a damage.
Right. So, but like you don't seem to treat income taxes this way. So my question is, why is it punishment when we're using alcohol taxes or cigarette taxes to fund schools or chips and stuff? But it's also not a punishment if we're taking someone's income percentage of their income and using that to fund, let's say, Medicaid, which they're never going to use.
Okay, so when you say the not fund Medicaid, which they're never going to use, so when we tax people, the government's already subsidizing a lot of medical care, even for people that don't have health insurance, right? That's a lot of how we prop up our hospitals to begin with. This is outside of Medicaid, this is outside of Medicare, right? That is a part of how our health system works, right? That's why we have such inefficiencies in American healthcare, right?
I'm only asking why is one a punishment and one not a punishment?
Why is one a punishment? So the punishment if you're paying in income taxes is redeem social value from what we all think is probably a good thing to have, right? Whereas if you're getting punished based on solely a sin, then no money goes to help those people who are therefore harmed by the sin. That harm that's caused by the sin is therefore enacted on the person who would be paying the taxes.
But it can go towards things that you would also advocate are good general societal things that income taxes could go to.
100%. But like those are things that benefit the larger society. I think that if we're going to be having targeted sin taxes, those should be gone ahead to target the damage done by those sins, right? I think that's a way that we balance those. Why?
Yeah, like why is it acceptable?
If the whole goal is for us to go ahead and have this thing have utility towards the reduction of drinking, right? For instance, okay, then we should be using those taxes to further that reduction, right?
Not necessarily if we can use it to fund chips, right?
Well, okay, but like, I mean, that's the thing. I'm already saying that no, chips should be separate, and because it's beneficial to everyone, so we all pay into that, right? Like,
But that's
kids
a
being more
punishment, right? Isn't it a
It's
punishment
not a
that
punishment because that's our agreed. I mean, I guess you could say it's a punishment,
Okay, it's a
but it's our
punishment.
agreed on. Like, it's like, man, that's like saying me going to the grocery store and buying a bag of chicken thighs is a punishment for living, right? If we want to say that life is suffering, I'm absolutely willing to read from the Mahabharata right now, but I don't think that's where we want to go with this. Okay, like the idea of like that's a suffering, right? We have a suffering that is all the shit that we pay for that we need, right? Which we say, hey, kids that are educated, less likely to commit crime. You know, they're like less likely to do drugs. They're less likely to do bad towards the whole society, right? So if we're going to be looking at sin taxes as a separate form of tax from income tax, which affects everybody, right? We should be looking at those sin taxes dealing with the sin itself.
Let's
So
go to.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I still don't understand the distinction because again, like you're taxing consumption of a particular good, right? And with income taxes, you're taxing a specific event, which is people working and making money. Now it's
your labor.
It seems weird. It seems weird to me. It seems weird to me how it's almost counterintuitive that we're considering doing the thing you probably shouldn't be doing, which is buying a bunch of booze. Like that's a punishment if we tax you for that. But if you're doing what you should be doing, which is going to work every day, like, and we take part of that, then that's not a punishment because that's like the price we pay to have the good stuff. When we could pay for that good stuff by taking money from the people doing the bad stuff. Why don't we just do that?
Well, because if we take the money to do it from the people doing the bad stuff, we're not understanding that the bad stuff that is in question, which is the sin, is through the function of addiction. Addiction, which is something that exists within our animalistic instinctual selves, right? So, because that's a thing, we've seen addiction occur within all species. Every species could get addicted to alcohol if given alcohol. Dogs prefer it, bears prefer it. It's a thing. Right? We know that addiction has this underlying mechanism. And if we're going to have any compassion towards addicts, which is why I think a lot of these bills are made, well, one, because like we don't want drunk drivers, but also because of the compassion that we feel for our fellow man, which I think is a lot of what this argument is, then we need to focus the money that we take from these into that same compassion if we're going to do it.
Let's go to Aiko and then Doobie if he has something else to say.
I agree with the focusing part. I just don't see how the taxes themselves are bad. I mean, by that logic, if especially also with what Spraticus was saying, that if making it more expensive makes everything bad because they have to work harder to do it, well, then heck, we should be subsidizing alcohol, and to that matter, we should be subsidizing hard drugs too, so that it can be cheaper for everybody.
No,
right?
Why would Why would so subsidizing is encouraging, right?
But if we don't subsidize it, then it'll be too expensive, and the hookers are going to be turning more tricks to get it. And if we make it half as expensive,
are we done?
Through subsidies,
are we done?
Are we done? We'll never be done.
He's not making a ridiculous. He's not making a ridiculous claim.
No,
it's just an extension of your argument.
So he is making a ridiculous claim.
But listen, what I wanted to do, I was really responding to Rezi though, is that if
you responded to Rezi, but you invoked my name.
Okay,
you can't invoke my name and then say, "Well, I was really responding to Rezi, but I invoked your name."
Well, I did invoke your name.
This is Spraticus. This is your dog pile of the week. Aiko, I'm sorry. Yeah, the whole idea of like targeting it, it's simply me saying sin taxes as we do them now. Yeah, they should be there to treat sins because people are going to do in this form sins. Okay, I don't want to like get a religious connotation because it's weird, but like sin as in something that causes harm to the individual that we can say causes like marked harm to the individual. So if there's that harm that happens to the individual, then that individual is therefore going to harm society. There should be a proportionate amount of harm to society that is then levied against the people that then choose to do it while we legalize it.
So I just wanted to send this link because you brought up cigarettes. I made that analogy. I'm just dropping it in chat now. And it shows the effectiveness that all of these taxes have had on cigarettes. So I agree with you. And we should have focused on rehabilitation for cigarette people as well. We didn't. We failed to do that. But the taxes in and of themselves still had a positive effect.
Yeah, I absolutely fucking agree with that. I will 100% agree with that, right? Because less people are smoking. So they raised the taxes further because they were happy with that little hog of tax that exists there in the first place. It's not going to helping people that have these addictions. They raise the taxes further and further because it's not going ahead and treating the cause. When you go ahead and tie cigarette taxes to chips, right? You're not doing things to help people that are actually struggling with that. No, you're just putting a higher burden on it, and then you're not actually solving the problem. It eventually leads to prohibition because of like increased prices. So if you're going to make these arguments, I think you have to argue that it turns into prohibition eventually, at least through like a manufactured form.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that this? I don't have a problem with that analogy, but wouldn't you say this gradual prohibition is way better than like an overnight prohibition like we did in the 1920s, which failed?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like
this gradual one
speaking,
seems to be succeeding. With
I just think that it's like, I think it's a little disingenuous to pretend like it's not. And I think that when I said that it was prohibition, I'll give respect to Doobie that he at least completely was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's where it goes, and that's where I agree with it. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, and I think that there's a disingenuousness to not look at these taxes as leading to a function of prohibition to begin with.
What would be wrong with prohibition?
Makes it more effective.
Now let's say it's so expensive at some point. It's like at $50 for like a beer, right?
Yeah.
So it's still available technically, but it's extremely expensive to the point where the average person just not gonna be able to afford it regularly. What would be bad about that?
The funny thing is, I don't drink, so you know, and like the most I do is
we'll
smoke
use
marijuana,
cigarettes
then.
so.
Yeah.
Okay. So
when it gets down to like that problem where it's like, what's so bad about that is, again, just, I mean, you could get into classist divides. I think overall, like, it's probably not good for us to have bad things, which is why I also advocate for taxing sodas, and we should start taxing sodas further and further and further until.
Okay, so you agree with the eventual prohibition through taxation.
And then eventually we should be doing the same thing for red meat, right? Like we should do that too, right? We should remove all flavor.
Sure.
And like personal.
Okay, now you're being a little bit silly, right?
But, I know, but okay. You know.
But okay, but just to be clear, so you agree with prohibition, the eventual prohibition through taxation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, eventually, I think I honestly, the thing is with alcohol, I actually think this way more, mostly because I don't really I think alcohol is actually.
Why shouldn't we extend that to cigarettes and to marijuana use?
Marijuana use mostly because I don't think that there's like a lot of. I think that you can prove like long-term issues from use in children, you know, as well as like I get you're not going to see the same rates of like emphysema, lung cancer, and stuff like that with cigarettes. I actually could agree with cigarettes. Marijuana, I'm less likely to agree with though.
I can't believe
just because you're a pothead.
No, actually, like I mean, generally speaking, no, it's just I don't think it causes.
They never think it's a problem.
Let's go to Sprout and then Johnny.
I just don't think that. I just don't think that it causes this amount of harm.
Like nobody thinks their addiction is harmful. That's the point.
I'm not addicted to weed. I smoke weed maybe
You're
like
addicted.
2 days a month, if that. If I'm going to be real with you.
Bullshit.
And that's down from when I was
to
smoking.
the train.
That's when I was. That's when from when I was smoking.
Sprout.
I can stop anytime.
Sprout.
So
then Johnny, then Amanda.
So everyone seems to forget when they're attacking my point is that one of my solutions to this problem was institutionalizing people that have addictions and making sure those addictions actually get dealt with rather than raising a tax on something. And so that point has seemed to be forgotten. And I'm not quite sure why. Yes, we should institutionalize people that have mental issues that they're not able to deal with by themselves if it is causing an issue in society. And so yes, I would argue that alcoholics would need to be institutionalized for a time for them to be able to recover from their alcoholism, and then released with an AA program or something along those lines when they commit a crime that has to do with like alcoholic tendencies, whether that be a DUI, whether that be like domestic violence that alcohol was a major factor in, or anything along those lines. I 100% believe that that getting them medical help and getting them the mental health help they need would be much more effective and much more beneficial to society, rather than a tax on the product.
They have those programs.
That's
putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
System for jail, or no?
That's putting a Band-Aid. The mental health is putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
They have those programs, by the way.
Because we already have Lactoid. We already have
those problems.
Programs.
So
when
people who get DUIs.
One moment, please. Yes, when people go to jail for alcohol-related issues, oftentimes either in the plea deal or as part of their sentencing, it is beneficial to assign them AA programs, time in a halfway house, etc. And I'll defer to Amanda.
Go ahead, Amanda, and then after that, Corey.
Yeah, but I've got. Can I push back a little bit because you can get I can go out there and get a DUI tonight, and they're not going to send me anything. I'm going to get fined.
What do you mean?
Essentially.
I'm
gonna get held over for the night just to relieve like the alcoholic tendency, and then it's essentially just gonna become a fine.
Sprout, it depends on like the level. So for example, the first time offense in my state is not even a crime, by the way, which is pretty crazy. It's just considered like a ticket. But
slap on the wrist.
It's literally not a crime in Wisconsin. It's like, yeah, it's not even a fucking. But if you like fourth time, fifth time, yeah, in order to get like a plea deal, you're going to have to.
And I would argue that's too late.
Sure. So you can say like first time alcohol offense, they have to get like alcohol treatment. I mean, that's a lot of people advocate for that. That's not a crazy position.
I don't think
that's what I'm advocating for.
I don't think there's anything wrong with like the idea of taking a tax revenue source and helping sort of continue to fund these programs. But I do think, though, I'm realizing perhaps I am going to push back on the idea that it will lead to eventual prohibition. I think that like alcohol does serve a very specific and important purpose within society, especially within adult culture. There's a lot of like business deals and other sort of like conversations that happen like in a sort of like a restaurant or a more relaxed setting that alcohol sometimes helps like engage people and make them a little bit more open to different kinds of business deals and conversations. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes those business deals can be quite nefarious and they can lead to other social ills. But that's exactly the reason why you should have some sort of revenue source to counteract that, whether it is to put funding into social programs or other treatment centers, as well as like enforcement and other sort of like policing efforts, not like huge policing efforts, like we can be clear about that, but other programs that help fund that.
Let's give leverage to people who can afford that alcohol to go ahead and do more nefarious things with people who can't at business deals and stuff.
I think that like there's also just the general like the obvious fact that like not everybody who drinks alcohol or consumes alcohol and on any sort of like frequent purchase like is necessarily going to be an alcoholic, and that it's important to address the fact that like people who do work in blue collar jobs who have access to alcohol or other sorts of like easy things like gambling and things like that are going to have a little bit of a concern there. But that's why certain things can help curb that behavior by not putting in the planning and the efforts to promote this kind of behavior. That's good, because there's other things that like people in those positions can do to help like better their community and society, like that those efforts can be put other places. So I think you can find like a middle ground. It's just that you have to be very clear with how you put those revenue sources.
Oh, 100%. I do think you could find a middle ground. However, I'm also citing historical record that this has never happened, that we've seen these things these prohibitive taxes and whatnot be enacted upon individuals, and then it doesn't go to help those individuals. I'm saying that there's a the problem with the prohibition argument here, right? And why I say it leads to prohibition is because those taxes then get raised, because then the kids aren't getting their health insurance, for instance, right? And then we go ahead and justify, oh, well, let's raise the tax a little bit more. And then slowly we see the spiral out until it literally becomes prohibited. And then those kids aren't getting their, health insurance as well. So instead of going ahead and tying kids' health insurance to these cigarette taxes, for instance, maybe we tie that to just normal income taxes, is what I'm trying to say. And that's what I'm saying.
I think you help these people.
As it stands, doesn't work.
I think that when you make these things more expensive for these people to get, you are helping them. I think that I don't think you need to have this money specifically going to a program. I think that just making it harder for them to get their hands on it is helping them in a way.
I think that that's true, but I also think that then if you don't just make them illegal, what ends up happening is it then can be used as a way to go ahead and browbeat people who can't afford these sins.
People should be browbeated.
Huh?
Yeah, they should be browbeat. I think it's fine.
Okay,
I mean,
all
at the
right, that's
point where a
Instead of
beer is
pun- instead of
$50, I
punishing-
think you would have people
Yeah.
making it in their bathtubs. Like we have enough
Yeah.
people who know how to make alcohol now. If a beer is $50, people are going to be doing it in their neighborhood.
And then we're going to be
Let's
sending
go-
them to
So we
jail, that
enforce
way you're gonna
regulations
go
we already
ahead and
have around food safety, and you put those people in jail for making unsafe products.
Exactly. And then when we
Let-
put them in jail, we're not going to help them or anything like that. Like we don't
Help
currently
them
do.
what? They're in there for
Like,
making
you know, we're
fucking moonshine in their
rehabilitating,
bathtub. Like, what do
Sproutacus
we
is
what do we
trying
help
to
them with?
argue that we're going to like turn into retributive justice and restorative justice, which isn't going to happen. That's not how America works. I don't see that happening. I would love that, but it's not gonna happen.
It's what I'm
You
advocating.
I know
choose
you're
to make
advocating for it,
alcohol
I
to
just think
poison
that
your
you're a
community,
dreamer.
the thing that you know is illegal, and you choose to do it anyway, then yeah, you should be in prison. Fuck you.
Let's go to Corey, Aiko, and Lactoid.
Well, yeah, just potentially a quick question because you might have already answered this, Sproutacus, where it's like to understand like your position or like the type of program that you want or implemented. Where it's like it seems like based off of what you described, like you basically like after their first infraction, after like with someone who's like consumed alcohol and they like commit a crime, then you want them to be institutionalized, or like I basically wonder like how like basically where does the institutionalization actually come in your system?
Yeah, first sign of criminal activity underneath alcohol abuse.
Okay, so with that in mind, where it's like I'm not against that in principle, but I also think it's fair to say that that is like useful like after the fact. Like I'd prefer people not commit crimes, even those who consume alcohol.
I would too.
And so it's like, and I'm sure you're also like in favor of like prevention programs, right? Where you probably recognize that
in some ways, yeah.
Yeah, where prevention is probably better than like they've committed a crime and now let's institutionalize them, right? I think that's a fair
right. So I mean, if we could get them therapists or whatever, and they could do it beforehand, sure. I don't see a way to recognize this and get it done beforehand in a feasible fashion. But sure, somehow if we could like pick out the people that we know are doing this and somehow send them to a therapist to get it dealt with before they commit a crime, then yes, that would be the opportune time to do it. I don't see a way in doing that and which is actually enforceable.
Yeah, I take your point. It probably would be tricky. I think we have enough information to kind of like identify, high risk individuals. But regardless, I don't see how like what you're describing is like incompatible with, let's say, my position of like taxing alcohol. Like I'm in favor of all the things, but like we can potentially fund those things through an alcohol taxation, as I think what Aiko and also I think not to put words or positions.
Okay, like I've stated plenty of times before, alcohol taxation is going to allow the rich to become abusive with this and the poor not to. It is literally causing classist issues. It takes the middle class out of the question. It basically tells the middle class, or at least the lower middle class, hey, I don't care if you do this responsibly or not. I don't care. You can't do it anymore because you can't afford it. And so like I'm against that. I think that I should have the ability to have a beer. I think that someone who's gonna be responsible should have the ability to have a beer. I don't think that taxation is the way forward, especially when the people that are going to suffer the largest consequences of this, because it's not going to be the people that are going broke. They're still going to go broke trying to get booze. The people that are going to suffer the largest consequences of this are the law-abiding, responsible drinkers that wouldn't be able to afford it anymore.
What if we tax? Sorry, I'm just gonna. What if we tax alcohol so much, and with that tax, we just give like UBI to those who are a certain socioeconomic status?
Free beer for the
Back
poor.
to prohibition. Let's go.
Yeah.
Free
So
beer used to
again,
win elections, by the way.
Have rich people fund poor people's alcoholism. What's the
Yeah.
problem?
The idea of making this cheap or subsidized is going to further the issue. I am not in favor of furthering the issue. However, I'm also not in favor of increasing the price artificially to try and cause this issue to go away, because it's not going to do that. The people that are going broke are still going to go broke.
Let's go to.
If it was free,
it wouldn't be artificial because we would be working with current tax documents.
If we're taxing a product, it's an artificial price raise.
Let's go to Aiko and then Lactoid, whose head's about to explode here.
I'm sorry. I just don't buy this idea that that the equilibrium price is somehow does the least harm to people. That if the price goes down at all, that's going to harm people. If it goes up at all, that's going to harm people. It has to be exactly at the equilibrium price. I just don't see any evidence for that. And also this idea that only rich. and only rich people can like be abusive with alcohol, that somehow hurts the poor more. Like, well, no, like boo-hoo, you're rich and you can kill your liver, but the poor people can't. Like, okay,
so
like we'll just let they
so
have
your
access
argumentation.
to.
So your
Hold on,
argumentation.
they have-
Your argumentation also excludes poor people that use this as a commodity, right? That it removes those people because you're talking about like, oh, the poor people can't abuse alcohol. Boo hoo! It also removes the poor people that are like, I want a beer when I watch football games. It removes those people as well. And so when you're talking about this, you really need to think.
That's
Okay,
why
you
I
don't
just-
think so?
I just,
It should
picked
be
up,
at work,
I just
Sprout.
picked up a 6-pack
Go ahead.
of one of my favorite beers at a local 7-Eleven for $6.99. So if you added this, what that study says, the 25-cent tax, I might pay $9 for that 6-pack. We're not talking about, like, I know we've been talking on this panel about $50 a beer type stuff, but that's really not what we're talking about here. In order to raise the amount of money that you need to do the kind of targeted funding that Resi says never happens, but actually does happen if you construct the laws correctly, then you can do some of that nudge incentivization, get that 9% reduction or that 11.4% reduction that the study talked about, and then use the funding for the kinds of things that Sprout you say you want to. And my only point is this: if we're going to talk about the slippery slope like we do, going back to tobacco, like number one, it worked. We all agree on that. But also, like, we're not getting the effect that Resi's talking about, which is people aren't growing tobacco in their backyards because the taxes have gotten incredibly high on tobacco. What's happening is tobacco consumption is at an all-time low. And I don't see like this sort of replacement effect of people immediately now going and making bathtub gin because we put a 25-cent tax.
Hey, talk about your tweet. Hey, talk about your tweet. The
yes.
tweet you posted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
The
yes,
tweet
the
you
reduction.
posted the tweet you posted specifically asked the people that last smoked a cigarette. This is not considered a cigarette. I would answer no on that question. I've not smoked a cigarette. I've actually not smoked a cigarette at all. I've smoked cigars, but I've never smoked a cigarette. I dipped. But you're excluding so many people that are still getting the nicotine, but it's causing that number to go much farther down than where it would be if you include things such as I want to say dip, but it's not really dip. It's like it's something that basically it's the same thing, but it's just nicotine. There's no tobacco. If you include vaping, if you include dipping, because I'm sure that didn't include dipping. He was just talking about cigarettes. If you include all the other ways you could possibly get nicotine, I'm sure that number would go farther up than where it is. I'm not going to say it hasn't gone down, but that going down to 16% is incorrect.
I agree with this. Like, I agree that people are going to other things that aren't taxed as much, away from the things that are taxed. So you're telling me that tax is driving people away. Like, for instance, if you're smoking a cigarette, it's not the nicotine that gives you cancer, right? It's the tar. It's all the other stuff that goes along with it.
Nicotinoids do have carcinogenic properties.
Sure,
is that
so
the main thing?
Yeah,
wait, hold on. But so does marijuana. So does marijuana. And you just told us that that's not as harmful as cigarette.
Well, that's HAR is what ICO is arguing for. Marijuana doesn't have nicotinoids in it.
Yeah.
But
I'm just saying, going away.
But hold on. But smoking marijuana can absolutely increase your risk of lung cancer.
Smoking cannabis, well, yeah, is definitely not healthy for the lungs. That is like for certain.
Well, yeah.
So
okay.
Taxing something is going to cause people to go to loopholes, such as if I want. Such as this is kind of off topic, but I'll bring it in as an example. Such as if I want a SBR or a short-barreled rifle, I have to pay the government $200 in a federal tax stamp per SBR, right? But if I want a AR pistol, on the other hand, which the difference between an SBR and an AR pistol being the stock, now I don't have to pay the government $200. It's now an AR pistol and it's now completely legal. So when we're talking about this, yes, when something is taxed to an extreme, people are going to go to something that is much more cost effective than what is taxed to the extremes. Yes. And I would also argue that people were going to do that anyways, with or without the cigarette tax, because vaping is a much cheaper way to get nicotine than buying cigarettes.
Yeah, it is a lot cheaper, isn't it? Right. And the fact that it's cheaper is what makes people do it, as opposed to
It's cheaper with or without the tax.
The tax works
it's cheaper
on the
with or
cigarettes,
without the
though.
tax.
Yeah, you just
it's
said
cheaper
that
with or without the. No, I'm saying it's cheaper with or without the tax. If you took the tax off cigarettes, vaping would still be a cheaper way to get nicotine than cigarettes themselves.
Unless you taxed vaping. If we
vaping already is taxed,
or you made it illegal to sell those kind of vapes, which we're already doing in California.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
To the
actually,
extent that people thought that vaping was a safer alternative to cigarettes, then they tax cigarettes and not so much undertaxed vaping. If it turns out like there's more and more science coming in, like Trump almost banned vaping himself. If more and more of that research comes in and says that yes, it's equally dangerous to cigarettes, then the same taxes should apply there. Like the policy needs to catch up with the science.
I gotta make room for my friend Lactoid. Johnny, I saw your face there. You look like you felt oppressed when they brought up vaping. Let's go back to
Yes.
So, I don't know, Prime. Look, as a winner of a Dare medal, I find myself starting to be convinced from everybody's arguments here. That's unironic, by the way. I actually did win a medal from Dare. I keep hearing the arguments, and I'm not hearing anything that contradicts the idea that basically any form of taxation is a punishment, which I believe. I'm not hearing, Sprout saying, what about the poor guy who's watching football with a beer? And Doobie's response is, well, maybe the poor guy shouldn't be sitting at home watching football with a beer. Maybe he should be working because he's poor. I mean, that's a good argument, right? Like, why are these people enjoying their
drinking iced tea?
Yeah,
with no sugar.
Like, enjoyment is a luxury that should come after you're successful, not necessarily beforehand, especially when you're partaking in a substance, which makes it less likely for you to be successful. And then also, I'm not convinced as to the prohibition argument, right? Because there's always going to be an equilibrium that you have to find when you factor in the black market. If you make taxes on alcohol high enough, then you're going to have illegal alcohol being smuggled in. Once the illegal alcohol becomes cheaper to acquire than the legal alcohol, you're not going to raise as much tax revenue because people are going to be buying that instead. You have to keep taxes at some sort of sweet spot where people find it cheaper to buy the legal stuff, but don't find it so expensive that they're going to the illegal stuff. So I don't know. I'm not. The more I listen, the more I realize this should be the only taxes. Actually, now that I think about it, there should only be alcohol.
Is your argument? I mean, I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not, but I'm going to ask: Is your argument really get back to work? Like if you're poor, you should have no enjoyment in your life. You should just work until you become successful. Then maybe you can enjoy your life. Is that sincerely your argument?
No, it's the Protestant work ethic.
Sort of to gulag.
Wait, sort of, because like look at it, right? If you're sitting at home, you're poor. You're not doing what's necessary to not be poor anymore. And you're doing something counterintuitive, actually. Like you're spending all your money on porn or OnlyFans or booze or drugs. Like, why are you doing that instead of going to work every day and making your situation better? Instead, what we're doing is we're punishing you for working by taking a percentage of your income. And then we're saying, well, it's a punishment if we don't try to stop you from doing the shit that's actually hurting you. We want these people to be going to work. So this is what I'm saying. We simply redistribute what money we're stealing from them. We instead steal the money from them when they're doing bad stuff. And we don't take any money from them when they're buying groceries or diapers or when they're going to work every day. That's some of the stuff that they can do scot-free because we want them to do that because it's good for them, right?
But the simple idea that you're going to rip any and all enjoyment from them is going to cause a huge increase in mental health issues. If you thought mental health issues weren't bad enough in the United States, tell poor people to get back to work when they're trying to enjoy their life.
I don't know what you're up to, but you don't need alcohol to have a good time.
No, I'm not saying you need alcohol, but he's saying that enjoyment should be something that should be left to when you're successful.
Unless it's good enjoyment. Unless it's good enjoyment. So hold on.
Unless it's good enjoyment. Alcohol. So now we're setting morals of this is good enjoyment, this is bad enjoyment.
Alcohol, yes, alcohol is correlated with mental health issues. The more you drink, the more mental health issues.
Moderate alcohol use is correlated with mental health issues, is what you're telling me. Because if so, I'd like to see that study.
So any kind of alcohol consumption is not beneficial for your mental health. There's no study that indicates that.
beneficial
ever.
for
But
anything.
it's not correlative, right?
I've seen some that like there's one study I saw that like red wine once a week is good for your heart.
It cures
I don't fucking
cancer,
know.
of course.
So it's
let's
not
go to Corey and then Rez. And I think maybe did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, Lactoid. I want to try to cover a few things. So you make it sound like so easy to not be poor, where it's like it seems like if you're poor,
They
it's
weren't
just a matter
drinking.
in your
Very
world.
easy, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So as in like if someone's poor and they don't consume alcohol, that is like the path forward to not be poor. And like
a poor person does not benefit from any vices.
Okay, yeah. And so it's like it seems like your overall argument is like if someone is poor, it's like presumably like that is their own fault. They're just not working hard enough. Is that like more or less your mindset?
So, I mean, yes, but that's sort of irrelevant. Hold on, it's sort of relevant for my point, which is though, like, even if it's not their fault, like the vices put up like alcohol and tobacco and the stuff, the fact that they engage in that is definitely not helping their position. In fact, it's actively hurting their position. And if they spent that time they spent the time working that they used to spend on like the shit that's hurting them, and they instead did that, helping themselves, like the percentage of people like mired in poverty would be much lower. Wouldn't you agree?
What if they did meth instead, so that way they could always be working?
Well,
what if they're doing meth that way they could be at work 24/7?
Cool.
That's an interesting idea.
Protestant work ethic.
Subsidized meth.
There you go.
Yeah. Like, what about that? That sounds actually interesting.
Done.
Yeah,
I mean, if there's a study that shows meth is good for work ethic, I'll take a
They'll
look.
be turning too many
Subsidized.
tricks if they have to pay more for meth. So just
The problem is
sure.
the dose, right? Because like if you just do too much meth, then like I don't know if you'll ever get the work done. So
Let's go to
just
Corey,
I just wanna finish.
Rez, Doobie, and then I think Johnny had to head up.
So I take your point that it's the alcohol thing is a separate issue, but like it's you still are like I want to like just make sure I understand your position correctly. You are of the opinion that like if someone who is poor, it's like it's essentially like they have a path forward to not be poor. They're just not like not doing it.
Right, well, especially if they're poor and they're taking government subsidies and government resources, and then they're spending their free cash flow instead of the things they would spend on what the government's paying them to buy. They blow that on alcohol.
As in like whatever. Yeah. So like it's like in your mind, like it's your fault if you're poor, and then it's even more your fault if you're poor and drinking things. Okay, so like 100%. So if that's the case, that you make it sound so easy to not be poor. So I would like you to are you able to sort of given what I know of like your health and fitness goals, you show me right now like your ripped, shredded 6-pack, and your defined shoulders, please.
I do not deny that I would be much better off if I engaged in no vices.
Post physique,
I'd be better. I'm not saying that.
No, you're missing my point entirely. Where it's like so I have all these things.
I'm not ripping shredded because of
why
my
do you not have all like those are your stated goals? Why have you not like it's so easy?
No,
right?
Because I have a poor.
But it's so easy to be ripped and shredded, right? So why not do it?
Because I have the brain of a poor, and instead of working out, I spend all of my time and money drinking and smoking and chasing women and gambling. All the shit that I shouldn't be doing is what I do instead of working out. And that's
all you're saying to me is like you don't understand your own behavior.
I think Lactoid is asking for help.
And thus you cannot.
I think if we increase the taxes, we'd actually help Lactoid.
Yeah,
he knows he can't control his
your
impulses,
taxes.
so he's asking us to do it for him.
I need it more expensive for me to engage in this. Otherwise, I'm going to keep doing it, guys. Please. This is.
Put a 1 in the chat.
But let's just say you are in the perfect position to empathize with someone who's in a lower socioeconomic status, but like that connection like is like you as in like the same argument. It's so easy to not be poor. I can just say I can push in your face. It's so easy to be healthy and achieve your fitness goals. Like for you in your mind being not poor is as easy as breathing. I could say the same thing to you in my perverted mind. I could get down to your level. It's so easy to be in shape not engage in the vices that you engage in.
Well, so I don't know. So easy, I guess easy is an interesting word here. If by easy does it mean like casting aside your vices and being a better person? I mean, yeah, it's easy in the sense of like it's clear what you should be doing. It's clear that you should not be engaging in it, and it's clear that there's certain
why
things
are you
that we
doing
can
it,
do.
Lactoid?
No, because I'm weak. Obviously, anytime you don't do something you're supposed to do, it's because of your own personal weakness. And this is why I'm saying that like when poor people are spending their money on alcohol instead of working, like ultimately it is their fault for doing that. That's my only point.
Again, you don't understand.
And it's my fault
behavior.
for that. I'm not. Yeah, it's my fault too. Look. This is the difference. I'm not blaming like society at large for me not being a jack stud. Once I am a jack stud, I will take all the credit. So it makes no sense that if I take all the credit, that I don't take the blame for not being a jack stud. Right? You got to take the good with the bad.
Let's go.
This is the thing about America. People often will think about policies as if they're going to be rich one day. So they want the policies that will benefit the future them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Rez, which is why I am confident in my future poorness, because I'm a socialist, all right? So let's go to Rez and then DB.
Yeah, to Corey's point, being poor is just as easy. It's not as breathing. It's just as easy as not breathing. To Lactoid, so you shouldn't have enjoyment until you're successful, right? You said that.
Well, at least you shouldn't have you shouldn't be engaging in enjoyment that is negative to your success. That's for sure.
Okay, but you went ahead and basically said anything that isn't contributing to your success, which is working, is detriment to your success, right?
Right. Or if you or to the things that would help you in a bad situation. So like exercise is something I think poor people should do, even though it's not directly work. I mean, you're going to lower your health care costs. You're going to be more energetic. You're going to be able to work harder and make more money and to be better off overall.
But the thing is, like, having a furlough in our time, having some time to spend away, to relax, to enjoy something, often is correlated to better benefits on an individual level in your ability to output, which ultimately, I believe in your world, means that's going to make your worth more, right? If you output more, you are worth more, right?
I don't know. I haven't read up on furloughs. I'll look at those specifically. I
like
know
furlough
that
as in like you're taking a relax. Okay.
Well, I know that retirement is specific. Retirement is associated. Well, I'm just saying, right? Like retirement is seen as like the ultimate taking time off, just taking a breather, relaxing. But every single study done shows like retirement's shit for you. Like it's bad to retire from a health perspective. I haven't seen the evidence.
60 and out, my man. 30. Logan, I support Logan's run if we could. Like
I don't believe in retirement.
I'm 33, man. I'm willing to do Logan's run at 30, right? And then honestly, I'm right with that. But this is like I think that there is this issue where it's like, okay, so like what is success then? Success, in my opinion, is enjoyment of like at least some function of your day-to-day life. Right? Like you've already said that retirement sucks. Like you're old, you're decrepit, you're not going to be able to do anything because you've broken your body on the, capitalist pay pig for how long, right? So realistically, I think that it's actually probably better to just enjoy even like these small things than hoping for that like long-term whatever, realistically.
I mean, you perhaps like if you're talking about this in the sense of like, it's difficult to like separate this when we live in a society again where if the non-successful people are disproportionately using up government resources, they're disproportionately like soaking up resources from society around them, especially and also if they commit like alcohol-related crimes. I mean, that's what the article was about. And so when you have people in this position who are, disproportionately affected by these bad outcomes and committing these bad outcomes, like this is not a demographic that has achieved the level of independence necessary to be making these bad decisions. To be making decisions where it truly only affects themselves, because you've got like a hyper, like if Elon Musk like starts drinking booze tomorrow, right, and like drinks like a fifth every day, like at the end of the day, he's not going to be getting help from the government because he has enough resources to take care of himself. But if you're in that position where you're not able to do that, then it does become my problem. Now it does become my problem when you're using up everything that I'm working for, and you're using that up because you have an issue and you're refusing to pay for your issue, and instead forcing me to pay for your issue. It just doesn't seem fair.
I guess I wasn't actually even arguing towards that, more towards like the idea that you seem to be anti-relaxation. And I kind of want to do like for poor people. So poor people work them to the bone.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
that's their way. That's their only way to poverty.
No, like that's literally. I just wanted that because I need every time I see you. I think we get to this point, and like I'm like, yep, I like you. I like you a lot.
Let's go to DB then Corey.
I think he might be muted, maybe.
Yeah, you're talking to DB.
Yeah, I muted myself. So I'm wondering like what's wrong with that though, right? So, like, if you're poor, right, and by poor I don't mean just that you don't have like enough money to buy a bunch of clothes every month. I mean, like, you're actually fucking poor, right? You're like, your electricity's in danger of being shut off every month because you can barely pay the bill, like that kind of poor. Like, what's the issue of being told, like, hey, you probably shouldn't be sitting on your ass relaxing if you have daylight hours left, and you can be using that time to either learning a new skill, picking up another shift, doing a thing that's gonna make your life easier, right? Long term, not just in the short term, not just getting a few dollars in your pocket, but learning a thing, a marketable skill, that's gonna get you a better job, either where you're at or somewhere else, so you're not in that situation anymore. Like, I don't understand, like, why are you shaming Lactoid for saying that poor people should be looking for the ways to better their lives?
No, I'm not shaming. I'm definitely not shaming
because
him. But
You should shame
all
him.
right,
You
so
should shame Lactoid.
yeah, there's a
Fuck
little
that.
bit of shame here because there's literally benefits to relaxation, right? If somebody's literally constantly fighting for every moment of their life, that is not a functional human being, right? They literally
Well, yeah,
just
this is why we don't
become
want them to be poor anymore.
roboticized freaks and everything like that, right? And like, you're basically just saying that yes, we need to make a new serfdom, which I don't agree
No.
with, but I
That's
just
ridiculous.
wanted Lactoid to do
Once
that.
they're
But
wealthy, they can relax.
I don't think Lactoid is saying, hey, you just grind your face against the wall every day and there's nothing ever gets any better. He's saying, hey, shit's bad right now. Find ways to make it better in the future, and then work toward those ways to get it better in the future. Like, what you're
Yeah, so,
suggesting
like-
is that you're literally just grinding your nose against a millstone every day. He's not suggesting that. He's saying, hey, look for ways up out of the fucking hole that you're in. And then once you get out of the hole, then you can relax. Then you have time to, chill out and watch a football game.
Yeah, but what if you don't have the capacities to do those sorts of things? Like, you don't have those capacities. You're just like, the best you
What if
can
you're
do
disabled
is,
and retarded
like,
and
you're
ugly and nobody
you're
wants
like
you?
a,
And,
like a 90
Yeah.
IQ working in a factory, for
no,
instance.
no,
Sure.
like
how do you get by?
I
Which is normal.
actually okay.
Me?
I
Yeah,
had
exactly.
I had a
That
time
says
off
something.
work. I had time off work because I was dealing with some pretty severe effects of PTSD. Okay, and I didn't sit around and drink all day. I didn't necessarily do a lot during the day when I took off time off work, but it was because I was physically and mentally healing my body. I wasn't like, and I was pretty destitute during that time because I was going off savings, and it was a whole thing, dude, but I wasn't going out and getting drunk. I wasn't staying in and getting drunk. Like, when you're in that type of situation and you're in survival mode, I think that looking at luxuries as luxuries is a good thing, and focusing in on healing yourself or healing your situation if you're not in a position of like severe health issues. Healing your situation ought to be the most important thing. Like, that's just my perspective from someone who's directly gone through this and not become a destitute alcoholic. Like,
Okay, this just-
hold on,
so,
we'll go to
honestly,
hold
this
on,
line of
hold on. I
thinking-
want to say something, and then we gotta go to Corey and then Sproutacus, okay? But like, I hate this. Like, so this is coming from a person who doesn't drink at all and doesn't do any sort of drugs. But
except for Twitch.
oh yeah, right. But like, this idea that that you can work your way out of poverty. There are people who are just going to be poor, right? Because they have structural barriers in place that make it unbelievably difficult for them, right? Some people can overcome those, right? And then we make a Hollywood movie about that and get Will Smith to play them, right? Some people can do that. Or most people will just like stay in their place in life because we have been systematically taking out all these structures that help people get out of their original socioeconomic status. Like, there is so much that you have to do to overcome to be able to make it, right? Like, you can't expect most people to do that, right? You are above average if you do, and most people aren't above average definitionally. So to then tell them, well, then you have to like work your whole life. You don't get any time to enjoy yourself, peasant, right? You have to work your whole life, work until you die, to try anything you can to get out of that station. And if you do take a moment to relax, right, whether it be through alcohol or through other ways of those other luxuries, well, then there's something wrong with you, right? There's a moral failing, or I guess a moral philosophical failing with you. I disagree with that completely. Let people relax, right? I would encourage them to actually try, right? To do all the things you were saying, to raise their status, to try to gain new skills. Absolutely. But they deserve moments of relaxation. You know, like, or else, like,
No,
as
they don't.
Cut their
I was gonna
hands off.
say,
That's
not
what
when-
we
not
used
when-
to
not when
do.
they're
don't deserve
taking-
anything.
Bring it back.
Yeah, not when they're taking my money. They don't deserve
Oh,
like,
yeah,
relaxation.
You're disgusting.
This
Corey,
this, ar- this argument
idea that,
sounds
like
Yeah, well, I'm going to expand on that, Prime, where it's like, yeah, all those structural issues, and to also like address, Doobie's argument and like Lactoid's argument, like what you're saying in terms of like work hard, like that fails to take into account like just what we know about human psychology, in addition to all those structural errors that Prime outlined, where it's like, okay, Lactoid, you definitely not my words, but your words were more or less like explicitly, I have the mind of a poor, right?
Yeah, when it comes to some things,
right,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So have you tried just like not having that mind?
A mind of a rich man.
No,
Yeah.
so what we're talking about here is like the policy prescription
No,
like,
like,
of alcohol.
Have you tried that though?
Not
Like,
really, because
well, why not?
I have the financial security enough to. I don't really care as much as I should if I was actually destitute and living off somebody else's money. Because if I was living off somebody else's money, I would find some kind of moral problem with that, and I would make steps to improve myself because I'd be doing something actively wrong, like every day of my existence.
So
but currently, I don't do that because I make my own money, and so I'm not hurting anybody else. So there's a lot more in my head, like moral room to do irresponsible and not like working out every day like I should, or working like as hard like over every weekend as I should. Like obviously, everybody should be improving themselves. All I'm saying is that if you are at the bottom and like your existence is one of like, again, like a parasite, almost like living off of the community around you. Like why don't we have this expectation of, yeah, don't blow your money on booze, instead go to the gym, instead do something productive with your life, read a book.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that Lactoid hates veterans as much as me.
I want to address that point. So it seems like you made the argument that as a result of your good material conditions, like I can't take care of myself. Is what you're saying?
There's not a moral compulsion. I don't have a moral compulsion to in the same way.
So it's almost like you
do.
in addition to like you having, you describe yourself as having the mind of poor. It's almost like the argument, well, you'd be in a better position if you were like actually had less material conditions.
Probably, yeah. It encourages the grind set, right? Because you have to.
So then how come I'm very fortunate. So how come I can do it and you can't?
Maybe you're stronger than me mentally in certain regards. I don't know. So
I would say
none of this addresses.
That's the disconnect. You don't understand your own behavior. It's like as a result of my own good material conditions, it's like I can't work to better myself. I have good material conditions because I'm lucky, and I can do it.
Here's the difference, right? So like Prime said something before about like deserve to relax. Like me and how I live my life is entirely irrelevant to the broader point of, I don't think that I have a right to relax. I don't deserve relaxation. That's not, especially when it's on the backs of somebody else's labor, right? And so what I'm saying is that if I existed in a world where my existence was relying on draining the resources of everybody else around me, that was how I lived every day, and I continued to do that. Like that would be bad on me.
So
that'd
without the welfare
and it would
state,
make sense. It would make sense.
So you're
to
saying
raise my
without the
blood
welfare state, without the
discourage
welfare
me from
state,
drinking.
without the welfare state, that didn't exist at all, like in your dreams, like in your wet dreams. If that didn't exist at all, would they then deserve to relax, right? Like if they could find the time between, starvation periods, would they be able to deserve to relax then?
Deserve isn't a word in my repertoire. Deserve doesn't matter. Like it's, I know it doesn't matter. Like if there's no welfare, then you don't have any taxes. And if you don't have any taxes, then we're not even talking about an alcohol tax to begin with, right? And I'm fine with that, right? Fine. If people want to like do shitty stuff, as long as it's not affecting me, ultimately I'm okay with that. The reason why I do care and why I think Doobie's convinced me why we need more alcohol taxes here is because like when people engage in this behavior of drinking alcohol, they're taking my money. Like they're taking my money. Right?
We got to keep it pushing because we have a limited time left. So let's go to Spartacus and then Johnny.
Honestly, so Lactoid, one question before I say what I was going to say is that if someone else is paying for your gym membership, then would you be shredded if I paid for your gym membership?
I could pay for my own gym memberships. Probably.
No, if I paid for your gym membership voluntarily, and you had the option of a free membership paid for by me, or you could pay for your own membership and you chose the free membership paid for by me, would you be shredded right now?
Probably not, because I already get my
probably not. Okay, so this whole argument sounds like if you don't get like paid bereavement time from your work, then no one cares that your grandma died. Show up to work. Like that's what this whole argument sounds like to me, and it sounds like a bunch of bullshit.
And then you won't be poor.
I'm just
Problem
saying,
solved.
don't drink. Look, if you have to do things that are like critical for like, again, like your mental well-being or something, like bereaving your dead grandmother or going to the gym or like spending time outside, going for walks,
Relaxing, which is important to your well-being.
Drinking alcohol is not correlated with any increase in well-being. It's in fact the exact opposite.
That's not how addiction works, by the way. You don't just make a choice. Like addiction robs you of free will. That's one of the effects that it has. So yeah, you could say that maybe, I mean, I realize that you're coming over to our side when you're making these arguments, Blacktoid, but I do think it's a little bit harsh to say that somebody who's in the throes of addiction should just be making better choices. Like,
well, they make the initial choice to get the alcohol in the first place, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. At the beginning of the cycle, like attacks like this might persuade somebody who's like 17, like trying to get alcohol or whatever, might make it a little bit more difficult if they've got to pay that guy in the parking lot, more than what they were, than what they have to pay now in order to get it. So at the beginning of the cycle, yeah, it could help. Although we don't make the good choices as kids either.
Let's go to
yeah,
John.
which is why should we take alcohol away from them?
Yeah. I just don't have any problem with the argument that if you are in fact in the throes of what I call survival mode, that you shouldn't drink. I find that to be a really interesting way that this argumentation went, though. I expected us more so to talk about in general policing morality from a government perspective. So it's interesting that we ended up here. But yeah, when you're in an addiction or an eating disorder or a severe mental health issue, and it is preventing, which I would say is probably, even if they're not diagnosed, I would say probably is the majority of the people who are destitute to a point of not being able to afford anything till their next paycheck type of shit. I do find myself agreeing with the idea that this is a luxury and this is something that ought to be looked at as a privilege, not just in the fact that you have to be an adult and a responsible person to enjoy it, but also in the fact that if you have other problems in your life, this might make your problems worse. So maybe fix those first.
Corey, and if we have time, Doopy.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick, just to address a couple of things. Where it's like, well, I think it's like I made it clear that I'm for taxation of alcohol. I'm just trying to like push back on a specific point that like Lactoid is like putting forth in terms of like So you mentioned also earlier in like I think you said like you're of the mindset that you have no right to relax. Is that like a fair thing?
Yeah,
to say
I have no right to relax.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and well, I guess I can't disagree. I would say, yeah, you have no enshrined legal rights to relax. But I would say when it comes to like mindset, I would say you do have the right to relax. And I would say maybe the fact that you don't view that you, let's say, don't have a right to relax is maybe why you struggle to like work hard in other domains.
Hey, look, yeah, there's always places I can improve, right? But there's also places that I've done okay. But there's trade-offs to be made, sure, whatever. Ultimately, I am responsible for my failings. And this is the difference, right? I'm asserting this, and it seems like some of the panel is saying, no, like these poor people who are spending all their money on alcohol, they need some relaxation time. We got to give them some booze. When it's like, if taking money from them is a punishment in the form of taxation, like why aren't we punishing the thing that they shouldn't be doing, and we are punishing the thing that they should be doing? That's the ultimate question. We like, why are we taxing their gym membership? Why are we taxing them going to work? Why are we taxing the things that we want them to do? And then people have an issue all of a sudden when it comes to taxing things they shouldn't be doing. Their cigarette smoking habits, their alcohol consumption, their whatever, drug use, marijuana, whatever they're doing, like the stuff they should not be doing, that if they spent the time doing other things that are more productive, they'd be better off in life. Like, again,
I could say the same to you.
Yeah, and I would pay the higher taxes, I guess, on the shit that I shouldn't be doing, because I would prefer to be doing things that I should always be doing. And look, if I had perfect self-control, I'd wake up every morning and I would hit the gym, okay? And then I would go to work, and then I would get home and I'd go to the gym again. And then I would write a book, and then I would read 4 books, and then I would be brilliant. Like
sounds like you have it figured out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go to Doobie.
Yeah, lactose is correct. I think lactose actually should be praised for having the bravery to speak so bluntly about his failings. Right. So I think that
I don't
in
disagree
essence,
there in terms of the transparency.
he's actually asking you for help, Corey. Right. He's saying, "Hey, I don't have the impulse control.
I've offered my help.
Stop doing these bad things.
I've lactose,
Please
I've offered
stop.
my help explicitly.
But you're not there. You're not there in his house, like taking control of what's in his refrigerator. Okay?
Well, no,
you know what?
When
Lactoid,
Corey, I don't have the impulse
yeah,
control
but I'm working on
to
it.
stop doing these bad things. Corey, I needed to help me do this. If you can't do it directly, I needed to help support the government forcing me to do these things. Right?
When Lactoid purchases a vice, I expect a $5 tax made in check form to the D Sproticus. And I'll accept a $5 tax on every vice that you purchase from now on to help encourage you to become the shredded lactoid that you so want to be.
Doobie.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that like this idea that there's some kind of right to relax that poor people enjoy or should enjoy is like, it seems I know that in this is actually the way that most poor people operate, right? So they do come home at the end of the day and they're tired as fuck from work and they're depressed about the situation. They're stressed out because there's not enough food. So they want a beer or they want to watch TV and just veg out and forget about life. But that's actually a bad thing. I think this is a mindset issue. And what you guys are doing is excusing the fucked up mindset that's keeping them poor. I think that you should tackle the mindset. Hey, say this thing that you're doing is bad, right? You don't have to be poor forever. It's true that most of you will be poor forever, but that's because most of you are just degenerates, right? Realistically, you don't have the spine, you don't have the impulse control. You're gonna fuck up, right? And if you're gonna fuck up, then you're gonna fuck up. And not all of you need to fuck up. So if you don't want to fuck up, stop doing the dumb shit. Make better decisions, and your life will be better.
Is that like directly lactoid?
I mean, to clarify.